Welcome, everybody. I'm Travis Watts. I'm Director of Investor Relations at Ashcroft Capital. In today's video segment, we are talking about IRR, also known as internal rate of return. There's a few metrics that investors look for when they're analyzing a multifamily private placement offering. Those three common metrics would be the cash on cash return, the coupon, or what's sometimes called a preferred return, and also the IRR, the internal rate of return. The simple definition of IRR is the rate of return that you receive from your investment when factoring in the time value. So let's talk here for a couple minutes about time value and how that affects an IRR return. Here's the simple way that I like to look at it. Any cash flow or distributions you receive early on in the project after you make your initial equity contribution to the deal have a higher impact on the total IRR than distributions or cash flows received years down the road. A common hold period for a value add business plan like what we implement at Ashcroft Capital on the short side might be 2, 3, 4, even 5 years. That means beginning to end of holding that asset. On the longer end, it could be 7, 8, 9, even 10 years. So let's look at a couple examples of how the IRR would differ in different scenarios based on the hold period. So in the first example, let's assume that I invest today as a limited partner into a multifamily private placement using $100,000 of my own capital. And let's say that 1 year later, the general partners decide to sell the deal. In that example, let's say I receive $20,000 upon the sale after a 1 year hold period. That would give me an approximate IRR return of 20%. Because a $20,000 gain off of a $100,000 investment is 20%. Also, not forgetting to mention that I receive in that example my $100,000 back, which was the initial capital that I contributed to invest in the deal in the first place. Now let's look at a different example where I put the same $100,000 into an investment, but there's no distributions of any type for 4 years. And then in the fourth year, we'll say the general partners decide to sell the asset. And let's say the gain was the same as it was in the first example. I received $20,000 plus my initial contribution of capital returned to me. In this scenario, the IRR return would be closer to 5% because we had to wait 4 years to receive the same amount of capital. So if you run the math, $20,000 gain divided by 4 years, that's about $5,000 per year or 5%. So you can see that the IRR is quite lower just simply due to the time frame that we had to hold the asset. Now, most value add multifamily private placements have a combination of distributions on an annualized basis. They might be distributed monthly or quarterly throughout the year. That's usually from positive collected cash flow from rents and other income generating items on the property. And then hopefully there's an element of positive equity at the end when you go to sell the property for a higher price than what you paid for it. In this example, we'll say I invest $100,000 today in a deal like that. I receive 5% in year number 1, which would be approximately $5,000 in distributions. Let's say it kicks up to 7% in the second year or $7,000, and then 8% in the third year or $8,000 in cash flow distributions. And in the fourth year, the general partners decide they're going to sell the property. And then after the property sells, they make a distribution to me of $40,000 from the equity upside upon the sale. So if you were to run an IRR calculation, you would be combining the cash flow that I've received year to year plus the equity on the back end. And when you run all those numbers together, that would be about a 13 to 14% IRR return. So I hope this short video has added some value and clarity around IRR and why so many investors look at that metric to figure out what their total annualized return may be on a particular project. As always, if you have further questions or would like to have a broader conversation around this topic, I'm always happy to help and be a resource. You can reach me at travis@ashcroftcapital.com.